Stop. Before you even think about tossing that quarter on your dresser, listen to me. There are Washington quarters ending in 4 that look completely ordinary, scratched, dull, maybe even filthy, and they're hiding serious, hidden wealth. I'm talking silent fortunes sitting in cup holders, couch cushions, gas station change trays. Do not spend these coins. Check your pocket now. Nobody talks about these because the collectors who know, they're quietly fighting over them. Real auction shock has already happened, and most people still have no idea. These coins change everything. And here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. Each one we go through gets rarer, tighter, more dangerous to ignore. By the end, skipping even one could cost you a fortune. Let's start with the one people laugh at, right before they realize what they've done. Let me tell you something that should make your stomach tighten. This coin doesn't look rare. It looks used. It looks tired. It looks like it bought a soda in 2003 and never recovered. And that's exactly why people lose it. The 1994 with P. Washington quarter was minted at the Philadelphia Mint, that tiny P sitting to the right of Washington's ponytail on the obverse. Most people never even notice mint marks. But collectors? They fixate on them. They obsess over them. And in 1994, something happened that quietly separated ordinary quarters from a microscopic group that became financial landmines in circulation. Stay with me. 1994 was not some random peaceful filler year. The United States was in the middle of economic recalibration. Interest rates were climbing. The Federal Reserve was tightening. Inflation anxiety lingered from the early 90s slowdown. Manufacturing output was being pushed hard. The U.S. Mint was under pressure to produce massive quantities of coinage efficiently. When pressure builds inside production systems, mistakes slip through, dies fatigue, quality control strains. And here's what most people never notice. When mints are running fast, the early strikes from fresh dies are crisp, razor sharp. But as those dies wear under pressure, subtle changes occur. Metal flow lines stretch. Detail softens. Micro-doubling can form. Die cracks whisper across the surface like fractures in glass. Now picture a batch of 1994 with P quarters struck under abnormal die stress, struck with slightly misaligned pressure and microscopic die fatigue. Not dramatic errors. Not cartoonish mistakes. The kind of nuanced mint state anomalies only advanced collectors recognize after years of staring at Washington's profile under magnification. This is where it gets dangerous, because most of these coins entered circulation unnoticed. The obverse, George Washington facing left, Liberty arching boldly above, In God We Trust tucked to the left, and that small but powerful P mint mark to the right, looked completely standard to the public eye. The reverse, the eagle with wings outstretched, United States of America crowning the top, E pluribus unum above the eagle's head, and $quarter anchoring the bottom, felt routine, familiar, forgettable. But collectors started noticing something subtle in specific 1994 with P examples. Metal composition first. These quarters are copper-nickel clad. Outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. Total weight, 5.67 grams. Diameter, 24.26 millimeters. Thickness, 1.75 millimeters. Edge, 119 reeds. Girth precise. Mechanical. Standard. Except when strike pressure interacts with that clad layering imperfectly. Certain 1994 with P quarters show unusually strong detail retention in Washington's hair ribbon and jawline despite circulation. That tells specialists the strike was unusually sharp from a specific die state. At the same time, Microscopic dye stress marks appear near the rim and within the field around Liberty. These micro characteristics act like fingerprints. And here's the twist. Most of the surviving examples were spent, thrown into laundromats, dropped into vending machines, scraped across asphalt. That old, dirty, circulated condition? It masked what was underneath. Survival rarity isn't about how many were minted. It's about how many survived with the right combination of strike characteristics and dye state markers intact. But wait, it gets worse. People clean them. They see toning, that natural gray, gold, sometimes faint bluish film that forms over decades as nickel reacts subtly with the environment, and they scrub it off. They dip it in chemicals. They polish it until it shines like chrome. And just like that, they erase tens of thousands of dollars. Cleaning destroys value forever. It removes original surface integrity. It creates hairline scratches visible under magnification. Professional graders can spot cleaning instantly. Once it's cleaned, the market trust evaporates. Original toning is everything. And here's what makes collectors borderline obsessive. Original dirty toning can actually confirm authenticity of dye state. It proves the surface hasn't been tampered with. It shows continuity in microflow lines. That dirt, that grime, that's protection. Stay with me. The Philadelphia Mint in 1994 produced millions of quarters. On paper, nothing special. But within that flood, a microscopic cluster of coins struck under very specific dye fatigue conditions, combined with circulation survival without cleaning, created a sleeper rarity. Most were worn down beyond recognition. Some were cleaned into worthlessness. A few survived exactly long enough to look right. Auction psychology kicks in here. When two advanced collectors recognize the same rare dye characteristics on a grimy 1994 P quarter, and they both know how few survived, logic disappears. It becomes a private duel, a silent escalation. Each bidder understands that if they lose it, they may never see another with that exact combination again. That's how a coin that looks like 25 cents can carry a market value of $45,000. Not hype, not fantasy. Today's market value is $45,000. And this is not about shiny perfection. This is about a very specific old dirty circulated condition example with the correct preserved markers. This tiny detail changes everything. Look at Washington's cheek under magnification. On the rare examples, you'll notice unusually sharp contour transitions despite circulation wear. Examine the fields near the date. Subtle dye stress flow lines radiate differently. The P mint mark positioning relative to the ponytail ribbon is critically inspected by specialists. Even the spacing between letters in Liberty can signal early dye usage. Collectors don't talk about this openly, because the fewer people searching, the better. Rising demand versus shrinking supply is brutal here. Every year, more examples get damaged, cleaned, or lost. Very few are professionally graded correctly because most people never submit dirty coins. They assume it's junk. Professional grading is critical. Without third-party authentication from a respected grading service, the market will not treat it seriously. Certification locks in authenticity. It preserves value. It creates liquidity. But here's the part you need to understand. Collectors who secure one of these don't sell casually. They hold. They wait, because patience creates wealth in this niche. As supply quietly collapses and awareness inches upward, tension builds. And when one resurfaces at auction, shock ripples through the room again. This is where most people make the fatal mistake. They find a 1994 with P quarter in a drawer. It looks dirty, worn, unimpressive. They spend it on coffee. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you confirm it's ordinary. Not until you know it's not the one. And here's what most people never notice. Before you even relax for a second, let me hit you with the part nobody warns you about. This coin doesn't scare people because it looks too normal. Not dirty enough to raise suspicion. Not shiny enough to feel special. Just fine. Very fine. And that's the trap. The 1984 with D Washington quarter is one of the most dangerously ignored coins in American circulation history. Not because it screams rarity, but because it whispers it. And whispers are what people miss while they're busy spending. Stay with me. 1984 wasn't some quiet filler year. It was pressure stacked on pressure. The U.S. economy was coming off brutal inflation scars from the late 1970s. Interest rates were still haunting households. Manufacturing expectations were high. Speed mattered. Volume mattered. And the Denver Mint was running hot. This is where it gets dangerous. When the Denver Mint ramps production, quality control narrows. Dies are pushed longer than intended. Strike consistency begins to drift. The Mint doesn't announce this. Collectors only discover it years later, when patterns emerge and supply collapses. The 1984 with D quarter was born inside that environment. Now picture this. Millions struck, yes, but a very small subset struck during a narrow window when die alignment, pressure, and metal flow combined just wrong enough to create a silent rarity, and just right enough to pass straight into circulation unnoticed. Here's what most people never notice. The obverse of the coin, Washington facing left, looks ordinary at a glance. Liberty arches across the top. In God We Trust sits tight to the left. The date 1984 anchors the bottom. And then there's that small D mint mark to the right of Washington's ponytail. That D is everything. Collectors obsess over it because in 1984, Denver Mint marks show subtle positional inconsistencies across die pairs. Some sit slightly closer to the ribbon. Some lean microscopically. Some are sharper than expected for the wear level. And when those markers line up with specific reverse traits, that's when the room gets quiet. The reverse shows the familiar eagle, wings spread, feathers layered, talons gripping arrows, and olive branches. United States of America crowns the top. E pluribus unum floats above the eagle's head. Quarter dollar rests below. But here's the detail that changes everything. On the rare 1984 with D examples, feather separation remains unusually intact even in very fine condition. That tells specialists the coin was struck with abnormal pressure consistency early in a die's life, before degradation softened the details, yet survived circulation just enough to avoid being hoarded or cleaned. That balance is lethal rare. Metal composition matters here. These quarters are copper-nickel clad, outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. Standard on paper, but under magnification, metal flow lines tell a story. And on the valuable 1,984D coins, those flow lines radiate with a consistency that shouldn't survive normal wear. Weight clocks in at 5.67 grams. Diameter, 24.26 millimeters. Thickness, 1.75 millimeters. Edge, reeded, precisely 119 reeds. Girth standard. Nothing jumps out unless you know exactly what to look for. This is not hype. The Denver Mint in 1984 experienced die fatigue at scale. Dies stayed in service longer than ideal. Many coins were struck late state and look mushy. Others, a razor-thin slice, were struck at a moment when pressure was still crisp, But metal stress had already begun to whisper across the fields. Those coins were not saved. They were spent. And that's why very fine condition matters more than mint state here. Mint state examples were scooped early by roll hunters. They're known. They're cataloged. They're boring. The dangerous ones are the survivors. Coins that circulated just enough to lose luster, but not enough to erase the micromarkers collectors crave. But wait, it gets worse. People clean them. They think they're helping. They think brighter means better. They soak them, scrub them, polish them. And the second that original surface is altered, the coin is dead to serious collectors. Cleaning destroys the very thing that proves authenticity. Original toning, that soft gray, faint gold, sometimes smoky film, acts like a time stamp. It confirms uninterrupted surface history. Graders rely on it. Collectors demand it. Once it's gone, value collapses. And here's the psychological twist. Collectors don't advertise this coin because awareness creates competition, and competition drives prices violently upward. When an authentic 1984D very fine condition quarter with the right die markers appears at auction, it doesn't spark curiosity, it sparks aggression. 2 or 3 bidders know exactly what they're looking at. Everyone else thinks it's another mid-80s quarter. Auction psychology takes over. No loud bidding. No drama. Just tight increments. Long pauses. Then a final jump that leaves the room stunned. That's how a quarter becomes a $75,000 object. Today's market value is $75,000, not because it's old, but because it's scarce in the only way that matters, surviving correctly. This is where supply collapse becomes real. Every year, more 1984 with D quarters are damaged, cleaned, bent, or lost. The number of authentic, very fine survivors with intact surfaces shrinks. Meanwhile, collector demand quietly rises as more specialists connect the dots. This tiny detail changes everything. Look closely at Washington's jawline. On the rare examples, the contour transition remains crisp despite wear. Examine the fields near the date. Subtle dye stress patterns radiate outward in a specific orientation. On the reverse, the eagle's chest feathers retain separation that shouldn't exist at that grade. Professional grading is critical. Without certification, the market won't trust the coin. Grading locks the story in place. It confirms the die state. It preserves liquidity. It separates treasure from pocket change. Here's a subtle collector tip most people never hear. Never assume too common means worthless. Common years hide uncommon survivors. And Denver Mint coins from pressure years are especially dangerous to underestimate. Patience creates wealth here. Collectors who secure one don't flip it. They wait. They understand that as supply tightens, every appearance becomes an event. And events drive prices. This is not a coin you rush. This is a coin you protect. So let me say it clearly, and let it sit with you. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you understand what you're holding. Not until you're absolutely certain it's ordinary. Because the worst financial mistakes aren't dramatic. They're quiet. They jingle. And they disappear into a cash register without anyone noticing. And if this one felt dangerous, good. Because the next Washington quarter ending in 4 wasn't just affected by mint pressure. It was born during a structural shift that created an even narrower survival window. And the collectors chasing it are far less patient. Miss the next one, and you might miss the coin that never comes back. Let me confess something collectors will never say out loud. Some of the most valuable quarters in America look like they survived a parking lot. Scratched, faded, edges dulled from decades of vending machines. And the 1984 with D in old circulated condition? It's one of the most financially dangerous coins you can casually lose because it hides in plain sight. Stay with me. When people hear 1984, they think common. Millions minted. Nothing special. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. 1984 at the Denver Mint was not a calm production year. It was volume-driven. High output. Efficiency prioritized. Dies pushed longer. Maintenance intervals stretched. That's when anomalies slip through. And here's what most people never notice. It's not about how many were struck. It's about how many survived correctly. The Washington quarter design in 1984 still carried the classic layout introduced in 1932. On the obverse, George Washington facing left, Liberty bold above his head, In God We Trust tucked to the left, the date 1984 below, and the small D mint mark to the right of his tied ponytail. That tiny D is the gateway. On the reverse, the heraldic eagle, wings extended in controlled strength, clutching arrows and olive branches. United States of America arcs across the top. E pluribus unum above the eagle's head. $quarter below. It looks ordinary. But this is where it gets dangerous. During high-pressure production runs at the Denver Mint in 1984, certain die pairs experienced subtle stress alignment issues. Not dramatic errors. Not off-center strikes. Micro-level inconsistencies. Slight shifts in metal flow. Marginal die rotation variance. Fine stress lines forming near the date and rim. These are invisible to casual eyes. But collectors? They stare at these details for hours. Now blend that with circulation. Old circulated condition means the coin did its job. It moved through hands. It bought gas. It slid across counters. It picked up where on Washington's cheekbone. The eagle's breast feathers softened. The high points flattened. Most coins degrade into nothing. But a microscopic slice of 1,984D quarters retained critical underlying die markers even after wear. That combination is lethal rare. Metal composition matters more than people realize. These quarters are clad outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. Total weight, 5.67 grams. Diameter, 24.26 millimeters. Thickness, 1.75 millimeters. Edge, 119 reeds. Girth precisely machined. Under strike pressure, the clad layers behave differently than solid silver. When die stress occurs, microscopic flow lines stretch across the nickel surface. On certain 1984 with D pieces, those lines form distinctive radial patterns that remain faintly visible even after circulation wear. This tiny detail changes everything. Because once a coin circulates, most diagnostic features vanish. But on the rare old circulated survivors, enough remains to authenticate that specific stress die pairing. But wait, it gets worse. People assume wear equals worthlessness. So they ignore them. Or worse, they clean them. Let me be brutally clear. Cleaning destroys value permanently. When you polish or dip an old circulated quarter, you erase surface continuity. You introduce unnatural brightness. You create micro hairlines. Professional graders spot it instantly. And once detected, serious collectors walk away. Original surfaces, even if dull, even if gray, even if uneven, are sacred. That old tone tells a story. It confirms age. It proves the coin hasn't been tampered with. It protects the microscopic evidence collectors need. Stay with me. The 1984 economy was stabilizing after a volatile era. Industrial output was high. The mint's goal was efficiency, but efficiency creates fatigue, and fatigue creates opportunity. The Denver Mint struck millions of quarters. The vast majority are ordinary, but a narrow production window produced coins with subtle die stress markers combined with slightly higher than average strike sharpness in the center devices. Most of those were spent into oblivion. Survival rarity isn't about mintage totals. It's about probability of intact diagnostic surviving circulation. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Old circulated condition examples were not hoarded. They were ignored, which means very few were preserved intentionally. Auction psychology on this coin is quiet, but violent. When a certified authentic 1984 with D Old Circulated specimen with the correct die characteristic surfaces, advanced collectors don't hesitate. They recognize how rare it is to find one that wasn't cleaned, altered, or worn beyond identification. Bidding becomes strategic, calculated, cold. That's how a coin that looks like pocket change reaches a market value of $60,000. Today's market value is $60,000. Not because it shines, not because it's perfect, because it survived correctly. This is not hype. Demand is rising quietly. New collectors entering the hobby are learning to appreciate die state rarities rather than just mint state brilliance. At the same time, supply shrinks every year as more coins are lost, damaged, or mistakenly cleaned. Rising demand, shrinking supply. That tension builds pressure, and pressure builds price. Here's what you should examine if you find one. Look at Washington's hair ribbon. Even in old circulated condition, the rare examples show a distinct inner line separation. Check the fields around the date. Subtle radial stress patterns may remain visible under magnification. Examine the reverse eagle's right wing on valuable specimens. Feather layering remains more defined than expected for the wear level. Professional grading is critical. Without authentication from a respected grading service, the market will not assign serious value. Certification locks in credibility. It separates a 25-cent coin from a $60,000 coin. And here's the collector tip most people never hear. Never judge rarity by shine. Judge it by structure. Patience creates wealth in coins like this. The collectors who own them rarely sell impulsively. They understand that as awareness spreads, competition intensifies. This is where it becomes personal. Because the 1984 with D in old circulated condition is still out there. In jars, in drawers, in inherited coin tins, in forgotten change bowls. People are accidentally losing this coin every single day. Spending it on coffee, feeding it into parking meters, handing it over for exact change without a second thought. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you confirm it's ordinary. Not until you know it's not the one with the quiet die markers hiding under decades of wear. Because here's the part that should sit heavy in your chest. The rarest treasures don't look like treasure. They look tired. And if this one made you uneasy, good. Because the next Washington quarter ending in 4 we're about to uncover doesn't just rely on die stress or survival luck. It carries a structural anomaly that collectors are aggressively hunting, and once you see it, you'll never look at your change the same way again. Miss the next coin, and you might miss the one that vanishes the fastest. I need you to slow down for this one. Because this coin doesn't just hide, it disappears in plain sight. If you've ever dumped change on a counter and thought, just another old quarter, this is the exact kind of mistake that quietly ruins people. Because the 1974 Washington quarter without a mint mark is one of the most emotionally dangerous coins you can touch without realizing it. Stay with me. 1974 was not a comfortable year in America. The country was still reeling from economic shockwaves, inflation pressure, energy anxiety, confidence fractures. The system was strained. And when systems strain, production shortcuts follow. This is where it gets dangerous. At the Philadelphia facility of the United States Mint, quarters were struck without mint marks by default. No letter, no identifier, just silence. And that silence is exactly why this coin slips through fingers unnoticed. No D, no S, nothing. Just an empty field to the right of Washington's ponytail. And here's what most people never notice. The absence of a mint mark in 1974 wasn't unusual, but specific survivor examples from that year became exceptionally rare due to how they were struck, handled, and lost. This coin doesn't scream value. It whispers it. Let's break that whisper down. The obverse shows George Washington facing left. Liberty arches across the top in strong but slightly rounded lettering. In God We Trust sits tight to the left of his neck. The date 1974 anchors the bottom. And to the right of the ponytail ribbon, nothing. That empty space is intentional. The reverse carries the familiar eagle, wings extended, arrows clutched, olive branches signaling strength and restraint. United States of America crowns the top. E pluribus unum floats above the eagle's head. Quarter dollar rests below. It looks ordinary. That's the trap. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. In 1974, the mint was under enormous production pressure. Demand for coinage was high. Dies were used aggressively. Quality control focused on speed, not nuance. Certain dies were installed, used hard, and retired quickly, creating extremely narrow production windows where strike characteristics aligned in unusual ways. Those coins were not saved. They were spent. And that's why old look, fine condition matters more than brilliance here. Mint State 1974 quarters were hoarded by collectors early. They're common. They're boring. The dangerous ones are the survivors that lived in circulation just long enough to avoid hoarding, but not long enough to erase critical diagnostics. That balance is rare. Metal composition matters more than people realize. The 1974 Washington quarter is copper-nickel clad, outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core. Total weight, 5.67 grams. Diameter, 24.26 millimeters. Thickness, 1.75 millimeters. Edge, 119 reeds. Girth precise. Mechanically perfect. But under pressure, metal tells stories. On the rare 1974 no mint mark quarters, subtle die stress patterns appear in the fields near Liberty and the date. Not dramatic cracks, micro flow lines. Fine directional stress marks that indicate a specific die state early in its fatigue cycle. And here's the terrifying part. Those markers can survive light circulation, which means a coin that looks fine, slightly worn, slightly dull, slightly old, can still carry the full fingerprint collectors are hunting. This tiny detail changes everything, because most people assume wear equals loss. They assume value fades with shine. So they spend them. Or worse, they clean them. Let me be absolutely clear. Cleaning destroys value forever. Polishing strips original surface integrity. Chemical dips erase toning. Abrasive cleaning leaves microscopic scratches visible under magnification. Professional graders catch it instantly. Once detected, trust evaporates. And with it, tens of thousands of dollars. Original toning is not dirt. It's evidence. That soft gray, faint gold, Sometimes uneven coloration proves the surface hasn't been disturbed. It confirms age. It protects the die markers specialists rely on. Stay with me. Survival rarity is what drives this coin's value. Millions were minted. Almost all were spent. Most were worn beyond recognition. Some were cleaned into worthlessness. A microscopic number survived with just enough wear to avoid hoarding, and just enough integrity to remain authentic. Collectors know this, which is why demand is silent but intense. When a certified authentic 1974 Washington quarter with no mint mark, old look, fine condition, and intact surfaces appears at auction, the room doesn't buzz. It tightens. Auction psychology here is surgical. 2 or 3 collectors recognize the diagnostics instantly. Everyone else sees a mid-70s quarter. Bids climb slowly, calmly. Then one decisive move lands, and the price locks. That's how this coin carries a market value of $90,000. Today's market value is $90,000. Not because it's flashy. Not because it's rare on paper, because it survived correctly. This is not hype. Supply is collapsing. Every year, more 1974 quarters are damaged, bent, cleaned, or lost. Very few old-look, fine-condition survivors remain untouched. Meanwhile, collector demand grows as knowledge spreads quietly through specialist circles. Rising demand. Shrinking supply. That tension is the engine. Here's what collectors examine first. Washington's jawline. Rare examples retain sharp contour transitions despite wear. The field near the date. Subtle radial stress patterns remain visible under magnification. The reverse eagle's chest feathers. Separation persists longer than expected for the grade. Professional grading is critical. Without third-party certification, the market won't trust the coin. Grading locks the narrative. It confirms authenticity. It creates liquidity. It separates a quarter from a financial asset. Here's a subtle collector tip most people never hear. Never ignore coins with nothing missing except a letter. Absence can be more powerful than presence. Patience creates wealth here. Collectors who own these don't rush. They understand that each year without new supply strengthens their position. When one resurfaces, it becomes an event. Now let this settle. The 1974 no mint mark Washington quarter is still out there. In old change jars. In inherited collections. In desk drawers. In pockets right now. People are accidentally losing this coin every day. Spending it. Dropping it. Handing it over without a second thought. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you understand it. Not until you're certain it's ordinary. Because the most expensive mistakes don't look expensive when you make them. And if this one made you uneasy, good. Because the next Washington quarter ending in 4 we're about to uncover doesn't just rely on missing marks or die stress. It exists because of a production shift that wiped out most survivors entirely. Skip the next one, and you may never forgive yourself when you realize what you let go. Stop everything for a moment. This isn't just a coin. This is a financial landmine masquerading as everyday change. You see it, and your brain says, just another quarter. But collectors know better. The 1974D Washington quarter in very fine condition is one of the most secretly coveted treasures in modern numismatics. And people are accidentally throwing away $100,000 every single day. Let me explain why this coin is dangerously overlooked. 1974 was a year of subtle chaos in the U.S. economy. Inflation had finally cooled from the highs of the early 70s, but wages and interest rates were still unpredictable. The Denver Mint was producing coins at a staggering pace to meet public demand, which created a perfect storm. Dyes were overused, metal stress increased, and subtle anomalies began to appear. Most coins from that year were routine. But within the chaos, a tiny sliver of coins was struck with perfect conditions that survived circulation, just enough to look ordinary while holding extreme hidden value. The obverse is classic Washington. George Washington facing left, liberty arching confidently across the top, in God we trust tucked to the left, and the date 1974 anchored at the bottom. And there it is, the D-Mint mark, quietly signaling Denver origin, just to the right of the ponytail ribbon. Most people don't see it. Most people ignore it. But collectors obsess over its placement, its exact angle, and its subtle relation to the ribbon, because that tiny letter can make the difference between a 25-cent coin and $100,000. The reverse carries the familiar eagle, wings extended, clutching arrows, and an olive branch. United States of America tops the coin. E pluribus unum hovers above the eagle's head. $quarter anchors the bottom. This isn't flashy, it's deceptively ordinary. But ordinary is exactly why most people spend it without realizing what they're holding. Here's what most people never notice: the metal composition. Copper-nickel clad layers. Outer layers 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper core. Weight 5.67 grams. Diameter 24.26 millimeters. Thickness 1.75 millimeters. 119 precise reads along the edge. On the surface, nothing seems extraordinary. But under magnification, dye stress patterns, subtle flow lines, and microstriations tell a story of rare production conditions. In very fine condition, these subtle markers survive just enough to prove authenticity. This is where it gets dangerous. The very fine condition is critical. Coins in mint state were grabbed quickly by collectors in the 70s and 80s. Circulated coins were ignored. But circulated coins that survived long enough to keep diagnostic dye features? Extremely rare. Most were spent, lost, or cleaned. Very fine examples retain subtle detail on Washington's hair ribbon, jawline contours, and the eagle's breast feathers, details most people wouldn't even think to check. And these tiny features can make the coin legally impossible to replicate in terms of value. And here's the part people ruin accidentally: cleaning. Old collectors know this better than anyone. Take that very fine 1974 with D and scrub it to shine like a new quarter, and you've just erased $100,000. Original toning, that soft gray with hints of gold and blue patina, is worth protecting like a jewel. It proves authenticity, preserves micro-dye markers, and maintains the coin's aura of rarity. Auction psychology here is brutal. When a certified very fine 1974D surfaces, advanced collectors don't hesitate. The room doesn't buzz, it tightens. Every move is strategic. They know exactly how rare the coin is, how few exist in this exact condition, and how quickly opportunity vanishes. Bidding becomes surgical. Every increment counts. The slightest pause can mean missing out on a fortune. This coin's rarity isn't about mintage numbers. Millions were struck. But survival rate? Tiny. Very fine condition survivors? Even smaller. And those left intact are locked away. And when they appear, the market reacts violently. Demand is rising quietly. Supply continues to shrink, and the tension creates explosive value. Collectors are obsessive because this coin is more than a quarter. It's a silent fortune. It's proof of early dye perfection, of circulation survival, of economic history in your hand. You could find one in a jar, inherited change, or even your own wallet. Most people will never realize what's in front of them. And the ones who do, they fight silently for it, never letting it go until the time is right. Here's a subtle collector tip most people never hear. Always check old circulated or very fine coins from Denver in high-pressure production years. Look for die alignment, subtle stress lines, and preserved detail in hairlines and eagle feathers. The difference between worthless and $100,000 could be almost invisible. Professional grading is critical. Authentication locks in value. Without it, no auction takes it seriously. With it, you hold a verified fortune. Patience creates wealth. Rushing or spending is a mistake you'll never recover from. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it carefully. Not until you know it isn't a common survivor. Not until you appreciate what it represents. Because the rarest treasures hide in plain sight, appearing ordinary while silently holding life-changing value. And if this one made your chest tighten, good. Because the next coin we reveal ending in 4 is even rarer, scarier, and more sought after than this one. Miss it, and you might never forgive yourself. Stop right now. Take a deep breath. Because if you've ever dropped a handful of change into a jar without thinking, one of the most dangerous fortunes in American coinage could already be slipping through your fingers. The 1964 with D. Washington quarter in old dirty circulated condition is a treasure that most people accidentally throw away every day. And the insane part? It doesn't even look valuable. Dirty, worn, dull. That's the disguise. And that disguise is exactly why collectors go crazy when one appears. Hidden beneath years of grime and circulation, this coin is a silent fortune waiting to be discovered. Check your pocket now. Because these coins aren't sitting in museums, they're in jars, drawers, and forgotten coin rolls. Nobody talks about them, yet collectors are quietly fighting over every single survivor. And the stakes? Life-changing. Real auction shock has already proved it. This coin changes everything, and it only gets rarer, tighter, and more dangerous to ignore as we go deeper. Stay with me. 1964 was a pivotal year in U.S. coinage. It was the last year quarters were struck in 90% silver. The Denver Mint was under pressure to produce billions of coins for a nation hungry for commerce. A year when economic tension, rising silver prices, and mint quotas collided. And in that collision, some quarters were quietly born that would one day carry extraordinary hidden value. Let's talk about the obverse. George Washington faces left, stoic as ever. Liberty arches boldly across the top. In God we trust hugs the left side of his neck. The date 1964 sits firm at the bottom, and the small D mint mark, just to the right of his ponytail, signals Denver origin. For casual eyes, it's meaningless. But for collectors, it's a trigger. That mint mark is a key that unlocks a microscopic universe of rarity, die stress, and survival probability. The reverse is familiar. The eagle spreads its wings, clutching arrows and olive branches, symbolizing vigilance and peace. United States of America tops the coin. E pluribus unum floats above the eagle's head. $quarter anchors the bottom. On the surface, it's ordinary. But in the hands of a trained eye, subtle anomalies in feather detail, die stress marks, and strike depth whisper secret history. Metal composition is critical. 1,964 D quarters are 90% silver, 10% copper, with a total weight of 6.25 grams, diameter 24.26 millimeters, thickness 1.75 millimeters, and edge of 119 precise reads. Silver gives the coin heft, presence, and a quiet resilience, perfect for surviving decades in circulation while retaining just enough diagnostic detail to make specialists salivate. And here's where it gets dangerous. Old dirty circulated condition is a blessing in disguise. Why? Because most people ignore it. They see dirt, scratches, and dulled edges and assume the coin is worthless. But those same imperfections protect the coin's micro-markers. Toning, natural grime, minor abrasions, they preserve authenticity, surface integrity, and historical signatures that grading experts obsess over. Most people clean them. They scrub them. They dip them in solutions that leave microscopic hairlines. Professional graders see it instantly. And just like that, a $125,000 fortune is reduced to a few dollars. Never clean a coin like this. Preservation of surface, even if dirty, is everything. And here's the twist most people never realize. Circulation can make a coin rare. The more a coin moves through hands, the more likely wear erases critical markers. Yet some survived, scratched, dull, abused, but intact enough to retain the unique die characteristics collectors are hunting. That's how an ordinary-looking 1964D quietly turns into a treasure. Auction psychology is brutal for these quarters. When a certified 1964 with old dirty circulated coin surfaces, the room tightens. Collectors know the odds. Very few survived in this exact state. Bidders recognize it immediately. The battle is silent, methodical, and deadly. Each increment matters. Each pause could mean losing a fortune that will not appear again for decades. Demand is rising. Supply is collapsing. Every year, more of these quarters are lost, damaged, or cleaned. And yet awareness is spreading quietly. Collectors are becoming obsessed with subtle die markers, feather separation, and toning patterns that signal authenticity. And when a rare example appears, the market reacts explosively. Let me give you a subtle collector tip. Always check Denver mint quarters from high-pressure production years, especially those in circulated or dirty condition. Look closely at Washington's cheekbone, the hair ribbon, the field near the date. Examine the eagle's breast feathers. Micro-die stress patterns often survive even when the coin looks battered. These tiny details are what separate a 25-cent coin from $125,000. Professional grading is essential. Certification locks in authenticity and preserves market confidence. Without it, the coin is just pocket change. With it, it's a life-changing asset. Patience is everything. Collectors who understand this hold and protect, knowing supply only shrinks and value only rises. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you confirm it's ordinary. Not until you realize that beneath the grime and scratches is a quiet fortune waiting to be recognized. Because this isn't just a silver quarter, it's a financial weapon disguised as pocket change. And if this one made you nervous, good. Because the next Washington quarter ending in 4 we reveal is even rarer, scarier, and more sought after than this. Skip it, and you might never forgive yourself for missing the coin that could vanish before you even notice it exists. Stop right now. Because this coin isn't just rare. It's dangerously, quietly, almost invisibly powerful. The 1964 Washington quarter, without a mint mark in Blackish, antique, beautiful condition, is one of the most secretly valuable coins in American numismatics. And most people are accidentally throwing $130,000 out of their lives every day. Look at it. Old, dark, weathered, mysterious. People see blackish tone and assume decay, wear, or dirt. But collectors see hidden treasure, silent fortune, a coin that survived circulation, survived decades, and somehow gained character instead of losing value. Check your change. This isn't a museum piece. It's hiding in drawers, in jars, in wallets. And when it resurfaces, collectors are fighting quietly, but aggressively. Real auction shock has already proven its worth. This coin changes everything, and it only gets rarer, deeper, and more emotionally charged as we go forward. Let's talk history. 1964 was a pivotal year, the final year of 90% silver quarters. The Philadelphia Mint, where most no-mint mark quarters originated, faced enormous pressure. A nation in economic recovery, rising silver prices, and massive coin demand. Production was pushed to the limit. Dies were overused. Mint employees worked at breakneck speed. And in that chaos, a narrow slice of coins was struck that would survive decades and emerge as some of the most sought-after rarities. Now, the obverse. George Washington's profile faces left. Liberty arches boldly. In God we trust sits to the left. The date 1964 anchors the bottom, and there's no mint mark to the right of the ponytail. That absence of a mint mark seems meaningless to most, but collectors obsess over it. That tiny empty space signifies Philadelphia origin and creates a production window so narrow that surviving examples are practically sacred. The reverse. Eagle wings outstretched, arrows, and olive branches in talons. United States of America at the top. E pluribus unum above the eagle, $quarter below. Classic. Familiar. But subtle differences in die stress and strike depth, especially on the eagle's chest feathers and the fields near the date, are what make this coin extraordinary. Composition matters. 1964 quarters are 90% silver, 10% copper. Weight, 6.25 grams. Diameter, 24.26 millimeters. Thickness, 1.75 millimeters. 119 reeded edge. Silver gives the coin heft, resilience, and a distinctive presence. And in blackish antique tone, the silver has developed a patina over decades, a signature collectors crave because it confirms authenticity and untouched surfaces. Here's where it gets dangerous. Old, blackish, antique condition looks imperfect to untrained eyes. People see dark color and scratches and assume worthless. But this natural toning is the coin's protective shield. It preserves surface integrity, die markers, and subtle minting characteristics that grading experts study for hours. Cleaning it would destroy this invisible signature forever. A single dip or polish could erase $130,000 of value. Circulation actually helps this coin's story. Light wear, gentle scratches, subtle flattening. They enhance character without erasing diagnostic features. That makes it rare in a way mint state coins cannot replicate. Most coins from 1964 were hoarded, melted, or spent carelessly. Surviving no mint mark examples with beautiful antique patina? Almost none. That's why demand among advanced collectors is extreme and silent. Auction psychology here is viciously quiet. When a certified blackish antique 1964 no mint mark Washington quarter surfaces, the room doesn't explode. It tightens. Experienced collectors recognize exactly what they're looking at. Every bid is careful, calculated. Every pause could mean missing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That's how this coin holds a market value of $130,000. Today's market value is $130,000, not because it shines, not because it's perfect, but because it survived in the only way that matters, with integrity, subtle die markers, and stunning blackish toning. This tiny detail changes everything. Washington's jawline retains crispness despite wear. The hair ribbon shows subtle directional flow lines. The field near the date preserves faint radial stress patterns. The eagle's breast feathers retain separation and definition unusual for circulated coins. These are microscopic traits collectors obsess over, traits that make the coin almost impossible to replace. Professional grading is mandatory. Without third-party authentication, the market won't assign serious value. With grading, this coin transforms from pocket change into a life-changing asset. Patience creates wealth here. Rushing, spending, or misjudging this coin destroys opportunity forever. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you confirm it isn't ordinary. Not until you appreciate the decades of survival, toning, and rare die characteristics hidden in plain sight. Because this is not just a coin, it's a financial weapon disguised as pocket change. And if this one made your chest tighten, good. Because the next Washington quarter ending in 4 is even rarer, scarier, and more coveted than this. Skip it, and you might never forgive yourself when you realize what you let go. Stop. Right now. Because if you've ever dumped quarters from your pocket into a jar or tipped them into a register, you may have just let one of the most explosively rare fortunes slip past you. The 1954 Washington quarter without a mint mark in old, scratched, circulated poor condition is the ultimate hidden treasure, and most people are accidentally giving away $140,000 every single day. Don't be fooled by its surface. Blackened, scratched, dulled from decades of circulation, it looks worthless, ordinary, forgotten. Yet, beneath the grime and nicks, this quarter carries a silent fortune that collectors hunt for obsessively. Check your change right now. These coins are not locked in collections. They're hiding in drawers, in jars, in old envelopes. Nobody talks about them openly, because the collectors who know are quietly fighting over every surviving example. Real auction shock has already proven their worth. And here's the kicker. As we go deeper, the quarters only get rarer, more dangerous, and more valuable. Let's talk history. 1954 was a turbulent year in U.S. coinage. Post-Korean War economic adjustments, inflation anxiety, and rising demand for coinage stressed mint operations. Philadelphia produced the bulk of no-mint mark quarters, striking billions under pressure. Dies were pushed far beyond typical usage. Strike consistency was unpredictable. And in that environment, a very small subset of coins was produced with subtle die anomalies that would one day become some of the most sought-after rarities in numismatics. The obverse is familiar. George Washington facing left, liberty arching above, in God we trust to the left, the date 1954 below. And there's no mint mark to the right of the ponytail, a silent signal of Philadelphia origin. Most casual eyes ignore this. Most people assume any 1954 quarter is common. But collectors obsess over this empty space. It signifies a narrow production window, precise die usage, and a survival story that makes this coin almost mythic. The reverse. The eagle spreads its wings, clutching arrows and olive branches. United States of America arches across the top. E pluribus unum floats above the eagle's head, $quarter at the bottom. Classic design. Unassuming. Yet subtle variations in feather detail, die stress patterns near the date, and alignment on both obverse and reverse make the difference between a quarter that's pocket change and a $140,000 fortune. Metal composition is critical. These 1954 quarters are 90% silver, 10% copper, weighing 6.25 grams, diameter 24.26 millimeters, thickness 1.75 millimeters, with 119 reeds along the edge. Silver gives heft, a distinct feel, and durability. And in blackish, scratched, circulated poor condition, the coin has survived decades, retaining just enough die-state information for advanced collectors to confirm authenticity. Here's where it gets dangerous. Old, scratched, circulated, poor condition coins hide their value in plain sight. The wear, the abrasions, the nicks, these are often mistaken for total loss. But those same marks preserve micro-dye flow lines, subtle strike characteristics, and toning patterns that graders and collectors hunt for. Cleaning this coin would be catastrophic. It would instantly destroy $140,000 of value by erasing surface evidence and authenticity indicators. Circulation actually adds story here. Every scratch, every worn edge, every nick tells a survival story. Few coins survive decades in circulation with the proper dye characteristics intact. And the few that do, they are considered sacred among collectors. Very few 1954 no-mint mark quarters in circulated poor condition are known to exist, making this coin a high-stakes prize. Auction psychology is intense. When a certified 1954 no-mint mark quarter with this survival pattern appears, advanced collectors don't hesitate. The room tightens. Every bid is surgical. Every increment counts. Pause, and someone else takes the fortune. The coin may look ordinary, but the stakes are anything but. This coin's rarity isn't just about mintage, it's about survival, wear, and subtle minting anomalies. Millions were struck. Most were lost, damaged, melted, or cleaned. The ones that remain in old, scratched, circulated poor condition are a microscopic fraction of what originally left the mint. That's why collector demand is intense, quiet, and growing every year. Here's a subtle collector tip. Always inspect blackened or poorly circulated quarters from pre-1965 Philadelphia runs. Even in poor condition, subtle dye stress, hairline features, and feather detail separation can reveal extraordinary value. A coin that seems beaten and ugly could easily be worth $140,000. Professional grading is essential. Certification locks in authenticity, preserves market confidence, and ensures liquidity. Without it, this quarter is just another 25-cent piece. With it, it's a life-changing asset. Patience is everything. Rushing, spending, or misjudging the coin destroys opportunity forever. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you confirm it isn't ordinary. Not until you appreciate the decades of survival, the subtle dye markers, and the rare no-mint mark signature hidden beneath grime. This coin is not just a quarter. It's a financial weapon disguised as pocket change. And if this one made your chest tighten, good. Because the next Washington quarter ending in 4 we uncover is even rarer, more coveted, and more dangerous to ignore. Miss it, and you might never forgive yourself for letting a once-in-a-lifetime fortune slip through your fingers. Stop. Stop right now. Take a deep breath. Because what I'm about to show you is not just a coin. It's a silent fortune that has been quietly surviving in plain sight for over 80 years. The 1944 Washington quarter, without a mint mark in old Blackish antique condition, is the ultimate hidden treasure. And people are accidentally losing $160,000 every day simply because it doesn't look like it belongs in a vault. Look at it. Blackish patina, where across the high points, tiny nicks, scratches, and decades of circulation. Most eyes dismiss it as just old change. But collectors? They see a coiled financial weapon hiding in your pocket or coin jar, quietly holding a life-changing market value. Check your drawers, your inherited change, your old coin tins. This coin is still out there, waiting. And the stakes are higher than ever. Real auction shock proves its worth. These coins don't just exist, they dominate collector obsession. Let's dive into history. 1944 was a world in turmoil. World War II was raging, and the U.S. economy was under incredible strain. Materials like silver were tightly controlled, mint production was under pressure, and coins were being struck in unprecedented quantities to support a nation at war. Philadelphia produced the bulk of quarters without mint marks. No D, no S, just silent authority stamped into metal. Within that enormous production, an almost invisible slice survived with integrity, preserving unique die stress markers and subtle anomalies that make today's collectors go wild. The obverse, George Washington faces left, Liberty arches across the top, In God We Trust sits to the left. The date 1944 anchors the bottom. And, crucially, there is no mint mark. That empty space is a treasure signpost. It signals Philadelphia origin, a narrow production window, and an artifact of wartime coinage that few have preserved in authentic, untouched condition. The reverse. The eagle spreads its wings with power and poise, clutching arrows and olive branches. United States of America crowns the top. E pluribus unum floats above the eagle's head. $quarter rests at the bottom. Classic, familiar, ordinary looking. But hidden in the feathers, in the fields near the date, and in Washington's hair ribbon are tiny clues collectors hunt for obsessively. These microscopic die stress lines, radial flow patterns, and strike characteristics are the fingerprints that make a 25-cent coin into a $160,000 fortune. Metal composition is critical. These quarters are 90% silver, 10% copper, weight 6.25 grams, diameter 24.26 millimeters, thickness 1.75 millimeters, with 119 reeds along the edge. Silver gives heft, durability, and a patina that, when darkened to this blackish antique tone, proves survival and authenticity. It is evidence of decades of circulation, handling, and survival against impossible odds. Here's what most people don't understand. Old Blackish, circulated antique coins hide their power in plain sight. Where scratches, dull surfaces, they preserve die markers instead of destroying them. Grading experts obsess over these subtle patterns because they prove authenticity, die state, and survival. Cleaning this coin would be catastrophic. One swipe, one polish, one chemical dip, and the $160,000 value disappears in a heartbeat. Circulation actually makes this coin rarer. Most 1944 quarters were spent, melted, or cleaned. Those that survived with subtle diagnostic features intact, even in poor condition, are microscopic in number. This is the type of coin that becomes legendary in collector circles, quietly traded, obsessively tracked, and aggressively protected. Auction psychology is extreme. When a certified 1944 no-mint mark Blackish antique quarter surfaces, the room goes silent. Advanced collectors immediately recognize its rarity. Bids become surgical. Pause matter. Every microsecond can mean losing an absolute fortune. That's how a quarter with a humble black patina commands $160,000. This coin's rarity isn't about mintage totals. Millions were struck. Most were spent, cleaned, or lost. Very few survived in Blackish antique condition with authentic die markers, circulation evidence, and intact toning. That scarcity drives obsessive collector demand, and with each passing year, the supply collapses further while demand quietly rises. Here's a subtle collector tip. Always inspect old Philadelphia quarters from 1940 to 1944, especially those with dark patina. Even in poor condition, check Washington's jawline, the hair ribbon, the field near the date, and eagle feather separation. These details reveal hidden treasure invisible to casual eyes. Professional grading is critical. It locks in value, verifies authenticity, and ensures collectors take it seriously. Patience creates wealth. Rushing or spending is a fatal mistake. Do not spend this coin. Not until you inspect it. Not until you confirm it isn't ordinary. Not until you appreciate the decades of survival, the toning, the micro die markers, and the silent history embedded in silver. This is not just a coin. This is pocket change that could transform your financial reality. And if this one made your chest tighten, good, because it's the final coin in this series, the ultimate crescendo of danger, rarity, and collector obsession. You've just seen 10 Washington quarters ending in 4, each one more dangerous, rare, and life-changing than the last. From 1994 to 1944, these coins survived decades of circulation, neglect, and ignorance. Some are hidden in jars, drawers, or forgotten coin rolls. Some are quietly fought over in auctions, while most are accidentally spent every day. Remember, these coins are silent fortunes, treasures that whisper but don't shout. They demand patience, attention, and respect. One wrong move, cleaning, spending, or misjudging, and you've lost something irreplaceable. But here's the truth every collector knows. The next time you check your change, you might just hold the coin that changes everything. The quiet, overlooked, ordinary-looking quarter that carries a fortune in the shadows, waiting for someone who knows how to see it. So check your pockets. Inspect your jars. Don't spend these coins. And remember, the rarest treasures often look like the most ordinary change. Because missing one could be the mistake you never forgive yourself for.